So remember, we have two Websters now. So Daniel Webster and Noah Webster. Don't forget, who did what? Number 2, which series of textbooks were originally published between 1836 and 1841? And what was the series called? Wait! Let's give people's hands. Alright, Breckin.
William H. McGuffey wrote the, how do you say that? Eclectic
Yeah,
Readers,
eclectic.
1836.
Electric.
Yeah, not eclipse. What?
I thought it said electric, I was like,
Eclectic. I'll double check pronunciation. I'm pretty sure it's eclectic because eclectic has to do with the idea of it's a bunch of stuff, like it's variety. I'll double check pronunciation. I'm pretty sure it's eclectic. I was like a year ago, so I'll double check. Number 3, who is largely responsible for the growth of Americans' public schools? Alright, Genesis.
Horseman.
Good job. Alright,
Horseman.
Horseman.
Horace Mann.
Horseman.
I was about to say, what is that name?
Who was the first college to open its doors to women? So this is the first like co-ed dorm.
You should do Genesis because she's a girl.
I'm offended.
Alright, number 4.
Oh, me?
Who you got?
Oberline.
Okay, Oberlin.
Why is the
yes.
door have
Oberlin College.
First opined, it's doors to one man.
Alright, number 5. What is the first college for
Woman.
women only? Do you want this one, Genesis?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, she does, obviously.
I'm offended. The first college for only women was Wesleyan.
Good job. Wesleyan. So that is the first one for women. So do you remember it? Where women started W, Wesleyan started W. So just make sure you keep track of Oberlin and Wesleyan.
Westland is also in Georgia.
So you have to remember this one too as well. Alright, number 6. Who pioneered the Lyceum movement in the United States? Alright, Chris.
Can I take the last one?
Sure. Alright, Breckin.
Josiah Holbrook pioneered the, how you say it, Lyceum movement?
Yep, Lyceum movement.
Mostly because I didn't have it.
Say what?
Mostly because I didn't have it.
You have number 6?
Yep.
Let's say homework
Oh,
event?
yeah.
Homework event?
You should
Homework event?
check.
Homework event?
Give him my homework defense for joking.
Okay. So are you wasting class time then?
Yep,
Yep, I took the
Okay.
mayor.
Make sure that you're not wasting class time. Number 7. How did the New York Sun revolutionize the newspaper business in America? One invention allowed news to spread more quickly. Alright, Chris, you
The
got
New
it.
York Sun began selling papers on street corners, and the invention of the telegraph allowed for faster printing.
Good job. Alright, anyone have a question about that?
That's a telegraph on the phone.
Telegraph. Telephone comes with
They're
it.
thinking of Morse code.
Yeah, so, well, Morse code is used in the telegraph. So, it is coming. Okay.
Is that why you became a science teacher? Because your last name is the same as Morse code?
You know, my dad's side of the family claims that he's some like great uncle, so I don't know. The Morse family did not keep super accurate records, so maybe not. So, but it's alright for it. Alright, go ahead and turn over to page 160 and get out paper for notes because there's no point reviewing because that's review right now. So we're gonna go ahead and get into it. Alright, who wants to read the quote by Owen Fowler at the top of page 168? Alright.
I'll do it.
Alright, Chris, you may read it.
What idiotable enterprise?
Okay, that's not how you say that. Here's what you-
How do you say it?
Indomitable.
What indomitable enterprise marks the character of our people? When immense forests have disappeared and given place to cultivated towns, thriving villages, and wealthy cities. Agriculture and manufacturers and commerce and schools and public buildings and houses of public worship. All these testify to our matchless enterprise.
Alright, what you talking about in this section? Anyone think you know?
Education, technology.
Free enterprise.
Okay, so
Welfare.
basically our country used to be just like wild land with forests and trees and mountains, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you see, okay, our country is becoming more and more developed. People are having the enterprise to build cities and become larger and larger and larger. Now again, today we protect our public parks because we don't want all of them to go away. But just think back that in this time period there was a lot of forest and there wasn't a whole lot of people compared to it. And so because of that, you're having people that are building cities. What was it, Ethan?
The global increased population.
Global increased population? What do you mean?
Soon we'll have no more room.
No. We will have room. We can always build floating floating cities in the water. We just haven't gotten to that yet. But people are very, very creative, and there's plenty of room out in the ocean. We just haven't gotten that
Elon
creative
Musk.
yet. But raise your hand. Yes.
Elon Musk.
What is that?
You know who Elon Musk is?
No, off the top of my head, no.
The inventor of Tesla, SpaceX, all of those.
I have a question.
I apologize for that.
Rich dude.
Yes.
Are we actually gonna have flying cars?
You're asking me personal opinion?
No.
I would say probably not, just because of how cumbersome they are. I mean, is it a possibility that, like, could someone have some new technology to where it works out better? Yes, but as of right now, based on current technology and current use,
Yeah.
it's not overly practical, and so that's the reason why. I mean, you could, but it's not overly
Maybe
practical.
hover.
Not in our lifetime.
Oh, no,
Not flying, just hovering, you know.
Just sit there.
Alright,
You can't run over curves anymore.
Your book's pointing out in this section with agriculture, arts, and just talking about education in particular. So if you were a child or a person and you grew up in this era, what would your life have been like?
Farmer,
All my stuff.
yeehaw,
Farmer,
marketing.
farmer, yee school,
Alright.
church.
So,
Working in the
yeah, just
factories.
most of it, yeah, but you were also having factory or industry workers as well for it. So it's just pointing out, okay, how would your life have been like in a section? Your book points out one of the major influences was the Second Great Awakening. Now remember, what's the major decade for the Second Great Awakening?
The 50s.
Which one?
The 50s.
There's more than one 50s.
The 1850s.
1850s, good job. So, that's having a great influence on American culture. Sorry, my allergies are kicking up all
I have a
the time.
question.
Okay,
Good.
Isn't this like the time period where like people grew up and only had like third grade education?
Partly, yes, but keep in mind that it is growing. You also had the one-room schoolhouse in this era. So again, this is the culture that people lived in this period of history. Alright, so education, technology, and culture. So more education for more people. Why do they want people to be educated in this time period? And I'll take the question.
Because people were growing up with third grade education.
Yeah, partly. Now keep in mind that people just didn't know as much back then. So if you got through a third to fifth grade education, you're probably pretty good. Now we are getting into high schools. Again, it's not quite as advanced as your high school today, but it's one of those, they didn't know as much back then. Alright, what's your question?
So, is it just me or does it feel like human race is like kind of evolving back to what we were a long time ago? Not technology wise, but like, kind of like, mentally wise. Cause like there's more literate people today than there was 20 years ago.
Alright, so, a couple problems with the question first off. So, you're implying by the question and what we're de-evolving and that we're turning back to how we were a long time ago, it makes it sound like that we started off stupid and then we evolved to turn to really
In a
smart.
way we did though. In a way we did start off stupid and we like
Learned more.
not really being able to make fire. But in a way we were alpha species. Like physically we were.
This man sounds like an evolutionist.
Alright, now keep in mind though that because people didn't write stuff down originally, but a lot of the ancient people groups were incredibly smart. Like we don't know how they did the things that they did, they just didn't write it down for a lot of
But then we
cases.
believe Aristotle's teachings for 2,000 years.
Because Aristotle, based on what he had around him, he didn't test it. But keep in mind though, that sometimes people, like the Mayans, calculated the stars thousands of years in the future just because. Or they built the pyramids, or there's a city in Peru to where all of the bricks fit perfectly together, to where they went and they cut the bricks on purpose. And I think they even did it to where, like with earthquakes, to where they'll all shift together.
But you don't
So
think-
it's stuff like that, to where the ancient people groups were very smart. Now again, you go through periods like, there was lots of information lost during the medieval time period, because a lot of the information was burned or destroyed with wars and everything like that. So, it was a lot of it to where people advanced technology-wise in more recent years. We have a lot of this higher technology, but it seems like human beings mentally, that they could do more, or they could remember more in the past. But as a collective group, it seems like we are turning not more stupid. It's the idea of there's a lot more genetic problems in humanity today. But also there's a lot more genetic diseases, is because back originally, whenever God created Adam and Eve, they would have pure DNA. And so there would be no like genetic mutations yet, because they're already fully formed. There's no mistakes in it. Okay.
There's a few things wrong with what you said.
Okay,
Not
wait,
that there's
whoa,
anything
whoa.
wrong. Not there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying like something that sounds kind of a little off to me.
Okay, so restate your question and then ask it appropriately and ask respectfully.
Some of the things you say I don't necessarily agree with.
Okay. Yeah.
Back then they obviously didn't have as much to remember. If we're being honest, they didn't have the ability to look up whatever they wanted on Google and just have unlimited knowledge to pretty much whatever they want. I think today people are necessarily kind of more more advanced in the way that our knowledge expands further than theirs did back then. Now they were more, in my opinion, they were more brutish. They knew a lot, but I think our IQs today are higher than they were back then.
So what was your original question? Your original question was asking why are we like de-evolving? Because you're just contradicting your
How?
original question.
Like I feel like we're de-evolving in the way that we don't like. I don't know how to word it, but like there's some of us that keep up with time, but it seems like there's more and more of us that almost in a way don't or aren't as smart as we were 20 years ago.
I don't know if it's that quick, but it does appear, okay, so, it sounds like you're trying to get two different things going at the same time and you're contradicting each yourself. So, technology-wise, yes, we are more advanced technology-wise today, but part of it is because, like, why would you need a calculator if you could calculate all the math in your head? Which they had to do algebra in their head, so they were doing stuff algebraically, and they were calculating that, and they either just didn't write it down, or they didn't decide to, like, tell somebody else because everyone could do it type of thing. So that's why, the reason why we invented calculators is to help save time and to help save people's, like, mental capacity, so that way you can do this now because you're struggling to do it, so I'm gonna make you something to help you do it and help do it faster. So that's the reason why, like, they knew how to do basic ideas, they just decided just for like whatever reason, it's one of those kind of like, what do you mean you can't do this? I can do it, he can do it, but why would I need to like write it down? You can't just do it in your head type thing. So that's probably the reason why they think that, okay, maybe that's why they didn't go forward as much in that. But I mean, different things to like building with Stonehenge. We're not sure how they did different things like that or why they did it in that particular place. We think it has to do with the stars and their religious like beliefs at the time. But it's one of those to where since they just didn't write it down, because again, why would you write it down if someone tells you and you just remember it? You write stuff down typically to either share information or to help you to remember it. So it's one of those, if I just tell you one time and you got it, why would I have to write it down over and over and over again? So it's one of those why we don't know why the original people groups did stuff or how they did it, because they didn't see the need to write things down for each other. But they were incredibly smart, and scientists are even studying, archaeologists are studying, why did they do this? Because they were very, very smart. Now again, they didn't do things with art and they didn't write stuff down. So that's the reason why we don't know why they did things, but they were very intelligent in some instances. But again, technology-wise, like electricity, we have more of that today, but simply because we're looking at how to better our lives and help us. Doctors understand that we have more genetic mistakes in our DNA today than in the past. That's because there's more genetic disorders today, is because, yeah, we are having problems with mutations. And so, generations, 100, 200 years ago, wouldn't have had nearly as many problems just because of humans today. So again, there is a general rule where even scientists understand that human capacity is getting slightly less, and that goes against directly to the theory of evolution, that we should be becoming more and more smart, or we should be becoming like more and more like angelic beings, and we're just not. We're becoming more and more chromatic. So guys, that's off the topic, we gotta get back into this. So, alright, so more education for more people. So, that's the reason why they're trying to get education from more people, trying to help them to become illiterate. So again, we're talking about this previously. Why is literacy important for a country and for a nation? Alright, let's go on to trying to press. We never talked about Genesis.
Because, say like, if you have, if there's a leader that knows a lot of stuff, and like, the people don't, the leader can just be saying anything, and the people are like, okay, cool.
Yeah, so you want people to be knowledgeable about the Bible, and that was a major emphasis there, but then also about your laws and about what people are saying. They just knew information sharing. That's what Chris was talking about earlier, sharing information. Trying to share information in this time period was becoming more and more important. So the newspapers are coming out, so as you would recognize them, so that was considered the common way to share information in this era. So, local schools, your book points out, in the original schools, there was the parent's responsibility, because remember, what was the act that was passed in Massachusetts saying, if you have 50 families in an area, you gotta hire a teacher?
The school act.
Not just that, anyone remember?
Isn't it like the North Ordinance Act?
Nope. Anyway, this is kind of, I think this is like 4 or 5 chapters back there.
Is it the old Duluth State?
That's it, Old Duluth State Act. And so because of that, they're saying, okay, you need to have a school teacher in your area. So originally, the curriculum, instruction, operation of the school, that was all underneath the parents. The parents would hire the teacher, the parents would pay the teacher, the parents would decide what was taught, and the teacher didn't do a good job, fired. So there was the parent's responsibility to say, okay, here's what my children need to be taught. They would be taught reading, writing, geography, arithmetic, spiritual values, patriotic values. Now again, this is the 1800s, there's not a whole lot of advancement in science or medicine yet, but it's one of those where, okay, you're getting the basics for it. We call this traditional education because it's concerned with passing on to the new generations the knowledge and traditions of the past. So make a note of that, that's traditional education. That's the type of education you are getting here at Grace Christian School as a side note. With the idea of all of the past discoveries or a lot of the key facts or key discoveries, key mathematics, we teach you those main ideas. Now, some schools, like public schools, will have specialized classes about one thing.
Yeah.
Now, this again, we're just trying to give you, okay, here's the common knowledge for a bunch of stuff, so that way, so that way you have the basics for a bunch of different degrees. Now, some of you might know already what you want to be whenever you grow up, what career. Some of you might not yet, and that's okay, you still have time. But it's one of those, like, okay, since you don't know, here's a good solid basics in everything to help get you ready as much as you can, so that way, whatever you go off to, you have some good basic life knowledge over how the world works. So, that's the idea of original education. It's when we're passing on to the new generation the knowledge and traditions of the past. So it's education plus passing on past traditions and history as well. Alright, your book points out in some cases, the parents, they couldn't pay the teacher in money, so they would give him food or her food, clothing, other items from shops or stores, depending on where he lived at in America. So it was basically the parents would keep the teacher in the area. What happens if the teacher started to starve? Ethan?
Bunch dies.
Yeah, he would. Now, what would the teacher probably do first before he dies?
Say goodbye.
Yeah, he'd probably leave. And so because of that, the teacher would probably know, okay, if they're not paying me either in food or clothing and I'm over here starving, I'm leaving. I'm going somewhere else. I have to get food. I have to get stuff. So in a lot of cases, the parents would try to take care of the teacher, but it was the parent's responsibility to supply the teacher with food or money or something that the teacher needed. Alright, early textbooks. So Noah Webster, the Blueback Speller. What else is Noah Webster known for? So raise your hand. Raise your hand. Genesis. The dictionary. So this is the first book that he wrote. So make note of it. So it's the American Spelling Book. It was nicknamed the Blueback Speller. This one is the largest single volume seller in the 19th century after the Bible. So this book was extremely popular just because it was a good educational textbook. It had a phonics lesson. Anyone know what phonics is?
I do.
Okay, Genesis.
I just know what it is.
Alright, if you had to describe phonics, what is phonics?
Oh, actually saying words like how they look.
How they sound
How they
out.
sound.
Yeah, so that's part of the reason as to how come here we teach it as phonics. So C-A-T spells kite. And so that's the reason why you sound it up. Spell it out for real. Like sound it up for real. Okay, say it quick. Okay, alright, say the C sound. Say the A sound. That's not
Like
A.
a Q, if I was in it.
Really? She wrote.
Alright, say the T sound. Spell it fast. Like say it fast. There you go. So that's the idea of phonics, as you sound out the words. Now, if you've been to a public school, you might have seen like sight words or you memorize it based on how the words look.
Yeah.
That works, but that's really cumbersome. So that's what comes this early version of phonics. That's what comes we teach it here this way as well, because it's easier to learn and you can figure out new words from it instead of having to rememorize words over and over and over and over again. So, the phonics lesson, so that's what the Blueback Speller started with. It would also have selections with scripture passages, character building stories, lessons in morality, geography, economics. So it's pointing out a lot of different things, not just phonics. So again, today in the American educational traditionalist system, we have different subjects with the idea of here's the phonics lesson, here's the math lesson, here's the English lesson. But in this early time period, because it was all the kids in one room and the teacher is teaching all the grades at the same time, she would give them, like, she would help the older kids, and then a lot of the older kids would work on their work, and the older kids might have to help the younger kids. So it was one of those that was very organized, and as a teacher, you had to be very, very organized and have to know how to juggle many different things at the same time, trying to help out all your students for it. Alright, your book has the very first reading lesson from the book in the block quotes on page 169. Who wants to read that first? Alright, Chris.
Is it the no man thing?
Yep.
No man may put off the law of God. My joy is in his law all the day. O may I not go in the way of sin. Let me not go in the way of the Lord.
Yeah, so he's just pointing out this one, even though this is one of the first reading lessons, or the very first reading lesson, just saying, okay, this is to help you know, even as a young student, that, hey, I need to follow the laws of God, and my joy is in his law. I need to make sure that I stay away from it and not follow the way of bad people or evil men. So that's the idea that he's already teaching little kids, saying, follow God's law and stay away from sin. And also your book has the next quote that says, it is of Noah Webster. He taught millions to read, but not one to sin, because he understood the idea of we need to teach kids good morals right off the bat. Alright, what is morals? Anyone know? Alright, Chris?
What you believe in and the way you believe you should act.
Yeah, so it's like right and wrong. And so that's the idea. He's trying to teach them early on morals or right and wrong based on the Bible. And so that's why he's introducing scripture passages and saying, here's what we believe according to the Bible. This is a good set of morals for it. Now, his profits from his book, his spelling book and other texts allowed him to basically take off from work and to write the first American English dictionary. So make a note for those two books, the Blueback Speller and the American English Dictionary. Make a note for both of them. Those are the books, both written by Noah Webster. Make a note for both of them. Alright, why is the dictionary important though? Even today, why is the dictionary important?
Because we can't.
Wait, raise your hand. I guess.
Because we can't spell.
Yeah, that's part of the reason. Now, it is nice with your computer and with your cell phone, you have spell check. But sometimes the computer or your cell phone will autocorrect you a word, and if you send that word to your parents, you're gonna get in trouble when you get home. So that's part of the reason it's how come you need to check, make sure. Is that really what I mean to say? Is that the correct word? I'm pretty sure that's not how you say that. So that's the reason it's how come you might want to look it up to see, okay, how do I say this or pronounce the word to make sure that it's correct? That's one reason as to how come we check pronunciation, particularly for science, because you want to make sure you're pronouncing words correctly as well for it. So that way everyone pronounces and spells the word the same way. This is one reason why if you look at older documents, sometimes the spelling for some words is different. That's because they were spelling it in a slightly different traditionally, or they were spelling it pronunciation-wise a little bit different as well. So he was saying, okay, here's the standard. Doesn't matter how you say it, we're going to all spell it the same way. Like, for example, caramel. Alright, what's the other way of saying caramel?
Caramel.
Caramel. So those are the two common pronunciations for it. Now, if you try to sound it out based on caramel and caramel, you might spell it slightly different. So that's the reason as why he's saying, okay, here's the correct spelling for it. As a side note, according to the dictionary, both pronunciations are fine. So that's the reason why you gotta be careful, particularly in the South. Sometimes the South gets kind of sloppy in how they pronounce things. So it's gonna you have to double check occasionally to make sure that you're saying stuff. Alright, sure, raise your hand, Chris. Chris, raise your hand. Nope, not right now. Alright, so thought provoker. Why is it important to teach morality with traditional academics? This is more of a thinking question, but why do you think it's important that your school or that your parents or that an institution teaches you what's wrong and right as opposed to just the facts? Okay.
Because teaching just the facts doesn't make them a good person.
That is very true, and that is very right. And so because of that, you can have someone that knows something, like a lot, like you can have a very smart person, and that doesn't necessarily make them a good person. Like for example, for Hitler and eugenics, okay, he was trying to basically purify the German population, so he was smart in how they went about it. His scientists were very smart people, but that didn't make them good people. So that's the idea. You want to make sure, okay, are you knowledgeable? Do you have facts? But do you also have the ability with the Bible to know what's right and wrong as well? Okay.
Wasn't Ted Bundy a lawyer?
I do not know this
He
person off
studied
the
in
top of
law
my
school.
head.
Studying in law school.
That's why he
Because, like, so,
represented himself in
that's,
court.
I guess if you think about it, it's another example of someone being super smart and just not being taught morals in school.
I would guess so. I don't know that person is off the top of my head.
I
I'm
guess,
sorry.
I have a question. So,
Okay, is this a real question?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, go. I only
So-
have like 10 minutes, go.
a serial killer, even if they're the smartest person in the world, it's a disease that they have, right? It's not no morals and nothing.
I don't know if you would call it a disease. This is whenever you start getting into the current train of thought. The current train of thought for conditions like that is that society makes a person and they can't help being the way that they are, which is problematic in and of itself. Because that would mean if you came from like a broken home, like my parents were divorced. And so because of that, they would assume of, oh, she came from a busted home, she's doomed to be a criminal, or she's doomed to have a busted up marriage and a busted home life. Which again is super depressing and super sad. But there are people that say that. But again, doesn't mean I'm doomed to be that way. Now, because I was put on that path, I have to consciously choose to not be on that path, but it doesn't mean I am doomed to not have a successful marriage just because my parents didn't have a successful marriage. So, coming back to your idea of a serial killer, now they might have had a rough upbringing or a bad upbringing, but you are still responsible for your own life, and that's what comes at the judgment seat of Christ. You don't get to drag your parents or whoever else in society with you whenever you stand before God. It's between you and him, or that person and him, saying, okay, here's your actions, and here's all the mistakes that you made. And so you stand alone for it. So that person decided to commit all of those crimes in and of itself. Now, you can be put on a path to where you're more prone to go that way, but it doesn't mean you have to go that way at all. There are people who had fantastic upbringings and then turned into these horrible people. So again, the upbringing does not make the person. It could put you on a better path, but just because your parents raised you right doesn't mean you're going to automatically be a good person. You have to choose to be a good person. You have to choose to read the Bible and pray and make sure you're aligning up with God's word. Okay, does that answer your question, or is there other parts to it?
There is another part too.
Okay.
The first one is super quick. So, like, you don't believe like schizophrenia or other diseases like that can cause someone to kind of act or do things irrationally that they wouldn't do themselves?
That has to do with more of like brain disorders, with the idea of, okay, you have a chemical imbalance. Now, some cases, yes, you can have it to where it's that to where you have something like actually physically wrong with you, and now you need actual help. But just saying, oh, my parents didn't raise me right, or my dad did something to me when I was younger, and that's how come I have this problem today. Now, you might have like emotional scarring, you might have problems like that, but it's one of those where you have to decide, okay, I can fix my body physically as best as I can, but a lot of stuff like mentally, like your thought processes and your choices and your behavior, you control yourself in a lot. There is kind of some rare exceptions. But as a general rule, you have to decide for yourself, and you don't get to stand for God and say, because this person did this, this is why I did this. God says based on your actions, what you do.
And
Okay.
it's unfortunate that scientists say that, because they truly are just going on statistics, and statistics, that is the kind of true thing, is that you come from who you were from.
Yeah, and that is statistically accurate, and I'll give you that. But it's one of those, like, you hear people say, 9 out of 10 people that come from a broken home, they're also going to have a broken marriage. You decide, well, that 1%, that's me. I'm not going to do this. And as someone that's been through a home with divorce, I know I do not want to go through such a thing at all, and I don't want to put my kids through that. And so because of that, you have to decide, okay, what do I do to make sure I never go through that, because it is horrible, and it is upsetting, and it causes lots of problems. So that's the reason why you say, okay, here's what I want to do. I never want to have that happen, so what I have to do to make sure I never go through this as best as I can and as best as I can for it. So again, that's the idea of behaviorism, with the idea of other things influence your behavior to a certain extent. Yes, but ultimately it comes down to you. So no matter what's happened in your background, you can still choose to overcome it and be better. There have been lots of people who have gone through horrible things, and they have risen above. So it doesn't mean like you have to be doomed for it. So again, that was a very long rabbit trail, but it is important to understand again why is morality with traditional academics important. Alright, next page. Alright, so Eclectic Readers, double check pronunciation, I'm pretty sure it's Eclectic Readers, written by William H. McGuffey. This one was the most widely used in a Jewish series of textbooks in America. They had a wide range of subjects on the inside of them. So morals again, geography, science, common sense, which feels like it's lacking today. Patriotism. So it's pointing out that they even had classical poetry and prose by Shakespeare, Milton, Bryon. So again, there's lots of other stuff on the inside of it. Ethan, you still with me? Awesome. Alright, so make a note of that with the Eclectic Readers and William H. McGuffey. They're the most widely used textbooks at this time period. Can you stand up, Ethan? Will that help you? You sure? I can put you on that. Alright, public education. You should have public education come out in this time period. So this is for primary public education, or elementary school, as we would call it today. Horace Mann, make a note for him that he pushed public education in Massachusetts. He was the first secretary of the Massachusetts Board of Education, and he wanted public primary school for all children, which in and of itself doesn't sound like a bad idea. But he was trying to say, okay, we want it to be tax dollar supported. So these new public schools were nicknamed free schools, because the parents didn't have to pay for them directly. Now keep in mind, it's public school free. Even today, these public schools are free.
No.
Public
Your
school's not
parent-
free?
No, your parents have to pay taxes for it. So your parent, and even though your parents are choosing to send you to a Christian school or to a private school, your parents still have to pay for your public school education. Your parents are just choosing to not use it. I have to pay for public school education. I don't even have children, and I still have to pay for public school education. It's one of those where your tax dollars pay for it. So you don't see it directly. That's one of the reasons why it gets sucked into it. So everyone has to pay public school education. You might know the reason how come your parents want you to make good grades is because they're paying a lot of money, not just to pay the tuition to come here, but they're also losing money because they still gotta pay for public school at the same time. So it is a lot of money. That's the reason why your parents might get upset. So just understand that's the reason why it's because they're spending a lot of money. They want you to learn as much as you can from it. He also helped found the normal school, which sounds really weird, but the first normal school is the school for the professional training of teachers. So a lot of cases, anyone know what you have to do if you're going to be a teacher today? Alright, Chris.
Don't you have to go to you have to have like a degree or something?
Yeah, you have to have a degree, typically a bachelor's of science, and then you have to get a certificate if you're going to teach in public school today as well. So this is the idea of a normal school. This is whenever they are getting professional training to make sure that they know their stuff before they become a teacher. Before this time period, typically it was someone that knew things, but you didn't necessarily have to have been to like a professional school, but you could teach it really well. This is whenever it starts to ship over that the normal school, this is for professional training of teachers as well. Alright, okay, that's all the major things for that section. So the public schools in the 19th and 20th century give a foundation in reading, writing, arithmetic, history, literature, the new sciences, basic morality. So a lot of the teachers were still Christians, they just worked within the public school system, and a lot of people still taught biblical values. It was just government instituted now. So again, it's not till around the 1950s for us. That's whenever we start shifting away from that. But these early schools said, yeah, we're going to teach all this stuff because everyone at least respected the Bible or were a Christian. So they said, oh yeah, we're going to teach Bible and Bible facts, and we're going to teach Bible morals because this is good for a society. So it wasn't an issue with the public schools like how we see it today, just because everyone was kind of on the same board in this time period. Everyone understood the same basic ideas. Now there's a little bit of problem with the idea of using taxes for public school. Now again, they meant well whenever they did that, but it's the idea of using taxes for public school may or may not be good for a community depending on how burdensome it is, but typically it's best if you have the parents directly involved, so the parents are aware of what you're learning and they're choosing what you're learning as well for. Alright, to make a note though, that people wanted to have the first public high school as well, so just taking note that America's first tax-supported high school was founded in Boston in 1821. That's your first date that you need to know. So, 1821. That's whenever you had the first public high school, or the tax-supported high school. It's in Boston and in 1821. Alright, higher education, we started having colleges or universities in particular. Georgia tried to get their university first, but North Carolina beat them. So that's because you have the University of North Carolina was technically the first one. Georgia tried to beat them to it, but Georgia wasn't fast enough. So University of North Carolina, that was the first one. So make note of that for the state university. Now, for the colleges for women, you have Oberlin College. That's the first co-educational one. Alright, if it's co-educational, what does that mean?
Multiple gender.
Wait, raise your hand. Okay, what?
Men and female.
Yeah, they could both go to school there. So, male and female could both go to school there. So, co-educational. Now, Wesleyan College, that was the first college for women only. You couldn't go there as a guy. So, again, just make a note, though, that a lot of the colleges this time period were mainly for gentlemen. So, again, the first co-ed one was Oberlin, and then the first one for women only was Wesleyan. Make a note for all of those three institutions of higher learning. So, University of North Carolina, Oberlin College, Wesleyan College. Alright, education for adults, because in some cases, if you were an immigrant or if you worked in a factory from a young childhood, you might not have had a good education. You did not have to go to school in this time period. You could work in a factory, but a factory was very dangerous work, and traditionally kids were not paid as much as an adult. And so because of that, you might have people that just become factory workers their whole life, but it was dangerous and they weren't making as much money. So a lot of adults wanted to better their lives by getting an education. So this is whenever you start having people start trying to, how can we educate our grown-ups or the adults that want to better themselves and want to get an education now? How can we help them? How can we have an education? Alright, what was a major source of spreading knowledge in this time period that is starting to become more popular?
Paper.
Okay, newspaper part of it, there was a different way.
So like word of mouth or something, or a dictionary?
Where would you go to find a dictionary? Remember, you don't have
The
computers in
library.
this time. The library. So libraries was the first major one. So Massachusetts authorized use of public funds to support the Boston Public Library. Now, I did not grow up with the internet, so if you needed to go find something for a research paper, you went to the library, same as every other kid in your neighborhood, because no one really had the internet or had access to it. And so because of that, you went to the library to go get your information. You would see kids with lists of index cards of, I need this book and this book and this book for my sources, and I better go find it in the reference section. So I have to go use an encyclopedia because Wikipedia is not even a thing yet. And so they would have to use the library. So libraries were a major source of information. Kind of like how the internet is for you today with going online and different things. The library was it for my generation. You went to the library to get all of your information for it.
You think the library will ever be non-existent?
I hope not, because, like, for example, if the power goes off at your house, could you access all of your internet? Could you access your information?
I don't think it's gonna be that easy.
No, I don't think so, because so many people put stock in paper books. Like, there are people that are like, die hard, I'm gonna get it on a Kindle or on a Nook. I want the full hard, like, paperback one. Just because you can have it and you don't have to worry about having electricity. It is an experience for them, but some of them just like to have it. Like, they have to have the physical copy that they can actually carry around. Because if your cell phone dies, or if your Kindle dies, or if the power goes out for an extended period of time, you're gonna lose all of your books and all the information. Like, in Louisiana, whenever we had a hurricane come through, we were out of power for an entire week.
Katrina?
What?
Katrina?
Gustav, actually.
How long was Katrina? How long was it out for Katrina? Like probably a month.
Actually, for me, it wasn't out at all in my area. But again, in Baton Rouge, we were not affected. Now, New Orleans was toast. But in Baton Rouge,
They were
It
more
was-
than toast. They were soaked toast.
yeah, it was rough for them. But it's one of those to where Gustav knocked off a lot of the power in our area because it knocked over so many power lines. So it just took days to fix everything. So even if you didn't use your cell phone a lot, a week's a long time. And so we had to get creative. And so thankfully I'd been to the library the week before because I was a nerd growing up, and so I would read books. So I was stockpiled of books I could read during that time period. So again, people understand that you need to have hard copies in case something like that happens. You don't want to lose all the information. Like we were talking about, how come people lost information from the ages people groups to here? That's the reason why we understand you got to write stuff down today, so you don't lose information.
Did you go to public school?
I did not. Okay, so just keep in mind though, so public libraries, this is one of the major sources of sharing information. Lyceums is another one. We don't really have lyceums today, so if you don't know what a lyceum is, this is an organization that conducts discussions and establishes libraries in public schools. They kind of do like public lecture type of thing, to where you would have someone come in as like a speaker and he would teach on a subject all at once to a group of people. Probably the best example of this today would be you go on YouTube and you look up someone talking about it. That's kind of the closest thing we've got. So this would be like someone comes in person and teaches it. But
Mr. Lubass.
yeah, you could do it that way. And so, just so you know though, so Josiah Holbrook, that he founded the first Lyceum. So again, this is kind of like a speaker speaking and teaching people on a subject, but at the same time, the Lyceum is the method back here. Today, you would probably use the internet more for this. But again, it does vary a little bit from area to area. Sometimes you do have it to where you have someone go to a city and they speak on a topic, or if you're gonna go off into a college, they might hire a professional to come in and talk to you about your degree or talk about a particular interest in it. So that's what a Lyceum is, or the ideas behind it. Alright, newspapers, maybe you know the newspapers. So this is the modern daily newspaper. Before this newspaper, you had to pay a subscription to, or a month, or you had to pay to get it. This time period, they started switching over to saying, okay, instead of selling it as prescriptions, we're gonna sell it based on advertising, to where people want to put advertising in our newspapers so that we can drop the prices. They originally sold newspapers for a penny per copy. That would be nice today, but newspapers are not a penny per copy. But again, because of the internet, you can go online and look up about it as well. They'll come occasionally, depending on what website you go through. They still ask for a subscription because they're kind of going back to that a little bit. But in this time period, it was just a penny a day for it. Second book points out that the first newspaper was the New York Tribune. Make a note for that one. He was founded by Horace Greeley. Take over him. You also have the Telegraph. This greatly sped up the rate the newspapers could get information, and so it made them much more accurate. Previously, you'd have to go send a reporter or a journalist, watch the event, come back, write about the event. It would take days, depending on where he went. Telegraph was much faster and allowed them to share information a lot quicker. Alright, magazines really quick. Magazine also flourished in this era. So one of the most influential was the Atlantic Monthly, edited by William Dean Howells, and he helped shape American literature by discovering and publishing many of America's great writers. Okay, make a note for that. Alright, just about out of time, so don't forget, what is Friday? President's quiz number 2. So make sure it's in the next 20 presidents. Sit up, right hand. The next 20 presidents in order, so make sure that you're
20?
studying them. Yeah, because the first one was 25, so we only have 20 left.
Who was the 50th president, Ethan?
We don't have 50th presidents yet.
Take that down.
Okay. Alright, so thinking back over it. Alright, who wrote the Blueback Speller? Frickin'
Noah Webster.
Noah Webster. Who wrote the American English Dictionary? Ethan.
No idea.
Noah Webster, sit up. Alright, what was the first university to begin operating?
North Carolina.
Good, University of North Carolina. What was the college that was for women only? Genesis?
Wesleyan.
Wesleyan. Alright, what is the one that was for coeducation? Oberlin. Who was the guy that was the first secretary of the Massachusetts Board of Education, and he pushed to have free public schools? M. I know. Alright, Genesis.
Horseman.
Horace Mann. Don't write horseman on your paper. So Horace
Says something
Mann.
M.
His last name. Horseman.
Horse man.
Horace Mann. His last name is M-A-N-N. There's 2 N's in that
Oh
last
man,
name.
I thought
Yeah.
you said horseman. I thought that was his last name.
No, Horace is his first name. Alright.